Hello everyone, today we're going to start a revision sheet for grade 5. The subject here is science. Okay, before we start, what I want you to do is actually follow with me line by line, and I will make sure that I repeat it more than once. Okay, here we go. Okay, the first question here regarding this revision is that we go through true and false. Point number 1. There are only two states of matter. There are only two states of matter. Here it's false. Why? Because as we know that the states of matter, we have three, which is solid, liquid, and gas. So, we have three states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. It's not two states of matter. The second point, the process of turning solid butter. Please focus here. We have solid butter, and it's turned into liquid butter. If I have like ice and it melts, so it changed here from which state to which state? Changed from being a solid state into a liquid state. That means, it has melted, like the ice creams in a summer day. Okay, so we have here a lot of processes that the state goes through. We have melting, freezing, boiling, evaporating, condensating or condensation. Okay? So the process here is actually turning solid butter into liquid butter, and we call it melting, which is true. The third point, the water moves around the earth in a carbon cycle. Definitely wrong. Why? Because the water, when it moves around the earth, it moves in a water cycle, not in a carbon cycle. Water moves around the earth in a water cycle, not a carbon cycle. Point number 4. The process of evaporation and condensation are parts of this cycle. Here, what I mean is about the water cycle. So evaporation and condensation, they do happen inside of the water cycle. Because we will have, like for an example, a puddle of water, and there is sun, of course. So what happens to the water here from the ground? It evaporates, and when it evaporates, it meets a cool surface, like cool air above near the clouds. So it condenses. That means it turns from gas to liquid. When it turns from gas to liquid, it became condensation. So these two parts actually happen in the water cycle. The sun plays an important role in the water cycle. Yes, it's true, because if we don't have sun, the water will be still on the ground and it won't evaporate and change into gas, and it won't be rising up into the atmosphere and meeting the clouds, and then it condenses more. So the sun plays an important role in the water cycle, and evaporation and condensation, they are parts of the water cycle. Okay, number 6. Substance cannot dissolve in water, so no solutions are made. This is totally wrong, because if substance here, if they dissolve in water, we will have a solution. Like if I add sugar to water, it dissolves or it doesn't dissolve? It dissolves because it disappears. I can no longer find it anymore. So the substance here cannot dissolve in water. So no solutions are made. Okay. If a solution is heated, the water changes into ice through evaporation? If a solution is heated, when I boil some water, like I'm trying to make some tea and I just started heating the water, what would I notice when it starts to boil? I will start noticing that the water changes into gas, right? But here they said, if a solution is heated, the water changes into ice through evaporation. We know that changing from liquid to solid, it's freezing, not evaporation, right? So evaporation is actually changing from liquid to gas. So that's why here it's false. Again, if a solution is heated, like the water, it changes into ice through evaporation. If water as a liquid changes into solid as ice, here we call it freezing, but we don't say it's evaporation. 8. Surfaces of some materials reflect light better than others. Surfaces of some materials reflect light better than others. Okay, the 8th point. Surfaces of some materials reflect light better than others, which is totally correct because we have, like, when it comes to light and reflection, we have some surfaces, some objects that they reflect light much better than the others. Like, for an example, take the mirrors. Okay, the mirror's shiny surfaces and still water are bad reflectors to light. When I come and see, like, the sea, for an example, the sea, when it's like it's not affected by the wind and it doesn't have waves, it's just calm and still. And the mirrors, when there's a light reflection upon these surfaces, it reflects light better than if it's like I've got this kind of like a wavy beach or a corrupted mirror. So practically here, the mirror's shiny surface and still water are good reflectors, not bad. The size of a shadow cannot change. Definitely wrong. Why? Because if I'd wanted to play a game with my brother or sister and we're trying to make like shadows of ourselves, we can change the size of the shadow according to the source of light and the object itself. So here, the size of shadows can change. The shadows are smaller when the objects are closer to the light source? No. Try to do like when the electricity just goes off, try to have like a flashlight and like this sort of a wall back at home and make yourself close to the source of light. You will have the shadow much bigger because when objects are close to the light source, the shadows are big. Okay. Water boils at 0 Celsius degree, which is false because water boils at 100 Celsius degree. Steam is evaporating water vapor, which is totally correct. The steam is what? Is all about water vapor, which is gas evaporating. 14. Earth's movement causes the sun to appear to be moving in the sky during the day. Yes, exactly. Because the movement of Earth, we happen to see the sun moving during the day in the sky. But we cannot sense the Earth movement. Number 15. Some material block light because light can't get through them, which is exactly like the opaque objects. We call them opaque because light seemed not to get through them. It cannot pass. The light travels from a light source, which is correct. The light travels from a light source. Like a flash, you will happen to see the light as beams, straight lines, getting out from the light source and hitting the nearest surface to reflect it. The opaque material block light. This can cause shadows. Exactly. When a light cannot go through a material, shadows are formed. Light travels in straight beams or straight lines, that's correct. Water changes state, so it's lost. No, water changes state, which is totally correct because water changes from being solid to liquid to gas, but it's never lost. It's still there, but it has transformed. It has changed, but it's never lost. Okay. Shadows are always black and white. This is totally wrong because if I'm like we just made up a game and we're trying to play shadows and we had a source of light and we had colored objects. So here the shadows can appear colored. It doesn't have to be black and white. Okay, the next question here. Fill up the blanks. The saturated solutions are needed in order to form crystals. For an example, I had sugar and water. I added, for an example, a small cup of water and I added upon it 4 tablespoons of sugar. Here, the sugar is dissolving in the water, but there are tiny crystals that cannot be dissolved anymore because it's like the solution here, it became saturated. It doesn't need any more sugar anymore. So here, when it's saturated and you leave it for a while, you will find that the crystals are started to form, those who did not dissolve in the solution. So, saturated solutions are needed to form crystals. The factors like temperature and the rate of evaporation can affect the crystal formation. So, 2 things that can change the crystal formation is temperature and the rate of evaporation. Because how does crystal form? After you add, for an example, the sugar or the salt to the water and you have a saturated solution, the water starts to evaporate by heat. When it evaporates, the crystals start to form. If a solution is heated, the water changes to water vapor. When you heat water, what happens? The water here, from a liquid state, it changes into water vapor, a gas state. Okay. Shadows are bigger when the object is closer to the source of light. Shadows are bigger when the object is closer to the source of light. Temperature is a measurement of hot and cold an object is. So temperature here, when I say temperature, what is it? Temperature, it's like when we measure, is this cold, is this hot, and how cold and hot it is. Okay, water freezes at 0 Celsius degree. That's totally correct because water here, it starts boiling at 100 and it starts freezing at 0 Celsius degree. And the melting point for ice is 0. Light travels in straight lines. Examples of light source. Like, okay, in our daily life, what is a source of light for us? For sure, number 1 goes for sun, or the flame from fire, or the light bulb. Shadows are formed when the light travels from source, shines on something, but cannot pass through it. This is what we said earlier in true and false, is that the shadows here, when they don't pass an object, they start forming. So shadows are formed when a light travels from a source towards an object but cannot pass it, cannot pass through. We use a thermometer to measure the temperature. We use the thermometer to measure the temperature. When you get ill and your mommy is like so concerned and she wants to check on you and see do you have temperature or not? So what does she use? She used this device that we call thermometer or tool, medical tool that we use. It's called a thermometer to measure the temperature. The melting point of an ice is 0 Celsius degree. Here it's in red for you to focus more. That the first point, the melting point of ice is 0 Celsius degree. The second thing is that the boiling point of the water is 100 Celsius degree, and the freezing point for water is 0 Celsius degree. The water evaporates and rises up into the air as gas. When water evaporates, it rises up into the air as gas. Water droplets form in the clouds and fall to earth as rain. The water droplets that has been rising up in the clouds, and then the clouds here, when they gather all around, they start condensing when it touches a cool surface, and then it falls to earth as rain. Condensation is the reverse, Condensation is the reverse of evaporation. What does reverse mean? Condensation is actually the opposite of evaporation, because condensation is turning from gas to liquid. Meanwhile, evaporation is turning from liquid to gas. Shadows can be colored, so it's not just black and white shadows. Light meters, what do they measure? They measure the light intensity. Light meters, they measure the light intensity. The light meters here are useful in photography. The light meters, they measure the light intensity, and they are useful in photography. We can get solid back from a solution through evaporation. If I want a solid, but it's kind of like dissolved in a solution, how do I get it back? By evaporating, because when we heat it, the water evaporates into gas, and the solid crystals stay in the bottom of the container. What does translucent and transparent mean? Translucent, that means materials block some of the light. But transparent, that means it reflects most of the light and you can see yourself through it, like glass. But translucent, it's like you can't totally see like 100% clear. But transparent, like glass bottles, you can see through it. So it reflects most of the light that you see. The next here we've got general questions. What are the states of matter and the comparison between them? The states of matter we have solid, liquid, and gas. The comparison between them is that the solid has a fixed shape, that means it cannot change, and some can be poured like sand, but it does not take the shape of container. If you have a rubber and you put it in a box, does the rubber expand and take the shape of the box? No, the rubber stays in its place because it has a fixed shape. The liquid has a surface but no real shape. Why? Because it takes the shape of the container. Like if I poured some juice in a glass, the juice here takes the shape of the glass cup, right? The gas, it has no surface, no shape, and it takes the shape of the container, like most of the oxygen containers. Okay. Draw the process of turning liquid into gas and liquid again. What does this mean? When it changes from liquid into gas, what is this called? Evaporation. And liquid again, that means from gas to liquid, is condensation. So here it is. Here is evaporation from liquid to gas, and here is condensation from gas to liquid. Okay? Why does a solution need to be saturated in order for crystals to be formed? Because crystals form when solid particles cannot dissolve in water anymore. So the solution is called saturated. Again, why does a solution need to be saturated in order for crystals to be formed? The answer, because crystals form when solid particles cannot dissolve in water anymore. So the solution is called saturated. What happens when steam from a kettle or a hot shower touches a cool surface? Remember when we explained before in the water cycle that the water, when it's heated, it evaporates as the form of gas. But when it touches a cool surface in the sky, it condenses and falls back as water. So the steam here condenses and turns into liquid. The last question in this revision. When a puddle dries up, what happens to the water? If I had a rainy day and after that the sun came out, I have those puddles of water in the ground. What happens when the puddle dries up, and where does the water go? When a puddle dries up, the water evaporates and goes up in the air. Why? Because it evaporates and it has formed a gas, and it gets mixed with the rest of the air. So what happens? It dries up by evaporating, and where does it go? The water goes up in the air as a gas form and gets mixed with the rest of the air. This will be your science revision. Thank you for listening.